I pulled the chair back slowly, careful not to scrape it too loud. The candlelight flickered against the polished silver, and the air smelled like lilacs, though there wasn't a vase in sight. At first I smiled. Just being included felt like a rare thing these days. But then I saw it. The place card resting neatly above the folded napkin. Margaret. No A. No pause. Just the wrong name, curled in gold ink like it belonged. It was such a small thing. Just one missing letter. But it felt like the room had quietly decided I was no longer worth spelling correctly. I ran my finger across the edge of the card, not enough to bend it, just enough to feel its presence. My name, or almost my name. Someone brushed past behind me. I tucked the card back into place, smiled like nothing stung. But inside, it flickered, like a candle struggling to hold its light in a room with too much wind. I reached for my glass and tried not to let my hand shake. The room buzzed around me, clinking forks, soft laughter, voices rising and falling like practiced music. But I couldn't hear any of it. Only the soft thud of my pulse, steady and loud in my ears. No one looked, no one noticed. I watched my napkin rest perfectly folded and untouched. My name, my real name, wasn't at this table, and neither was I. She passed behind me then, my daughter-in-law, carrying a dish of roasted squash and something too sweet. Her eyes moved over the table, adjusting a fork, shifting a coaster. Her gaze skimmed past the card without a blink. No pause, no correction, just a smile, polite and precise, like the whole table had been rehearsed. And her perfume, it lingered in the air after she walked by. Sharp, expensive, sweet in the wrong way. I closed my eyes for half a breath. I used to wonder when she'd start seeing me. But now, I wondered when she stopped. My hand drifted back to the place card, the curve of the gold lettering shimmering in the candlelight. The T caught a little glint, like it was proud of being the last letter standing. It wasn't a typo, it was a decision, a quiet one. Like the volume had been turned down on my life until I faded into the background, and this was the final confirmation. No one had erased me. They just rewrote me. I could have said something. I could have made a small scene, made a gentle joke. Looks like I lost a letter tonight, but I didn't. Instead, I smoothed the card gently with my fingertips and pressed it back into its spot, like maybe I was the one out of place. I smiled again. The kind I'd practiced over the years, the one that looks like warmth, but feels like standing outside with your coat open in the cold. Then I whispered it to myself. Just once. Margaret. Just to hear it again. Just to remember. The kitchen walls were lemon yellow, not paint store bright, but soft, like sunshine that had lived there a long time. I used to say it looked like a morning that never ended. The color just wrapped around you, warm and kind, like someone placing a gentle hand on your back while you stirred oatmeal. That kitchen held us together. Every squeaky floorboard, every chipped tile had a story. The wooden spoon drawer stuck if you pulled it too fast. The windows fogged up in winter, and in spring, sunlight spilled across the gingham curtains like gold ribbon unraveling. I remember waking up to the scent of toast and lemon dish soap, coffee brewing, a soft whistle from the kettle. That space knew my name even when no one else was around to say it. It was in the way I folded the dish towels, the way my hand moved across the countertop without needing to think. "Mom, where's my math folder?" she used to yell from the hallway. "In the bread box, sweetie," I'd call back, and it usually was. I mattered there. Not in a loud way, but in the way my presence was felt in everything. My name wasn't just said in that house. It was lived in. The floor creaked under my steps that morning, same as always. Not annoying, not broken, just lived in. Loved. That kitchen made me feel like Margaret, fully, safely, like I belonged exactly where I stood. Every morning started the same. I'd hear the tap-tap, 2 light knocks of his spoon against his coffee mug. That was his way of saying good morning without speaking, and somehow I heard it louder than any words. By the time I made it into the kitchen, he'd already be seated, in his usual chair, newspaper folded to the crossword. "You're late, Maggie," he'd grin. "I'm not late." "You're just early," I'd smile, setting the butter dish beside him. The air always smelled like toast and steam, fresh, simple, ours. The radio played softly in the background, Nat King Cole most days, filling the corners with music that felt like memory. He never said my name like it was a task. It always came with a curl of warmth, a pause, a kind of respect I didn't notice I needed until years later. "Maggie, where's the cream?" "Behind the pickles, like always." I'd sit across from him with my own mug, and we wouldn't need to say much. That was the beauty of it, just the tap of his spoon and the steady rhythm of 2 people who had built something together. I remember thinking once, if I ever forget who I am, this sound will remind me, and for a long time, it did. I was drying the last plate when I caught the music changing on the radio. Some upbeat jazz tune slipped in, something with a little skip to it. I glanced over at her. She was 5 then, sitting on the floor with a crayon clutched in one hand and a napkin she was pretending was a doll dress in the other. I held the dish towel high, did a slow little spin, and dipped like I was finishing a ballroom dance. She giggled so hard she dropped the crayon. "Do it again, Mommy." I twirled again, a little faster this time. The towel swished around me, and I imagined I was on stage somewhere, even though I was barefoot on a linoleum floor with a wet sponge in my pocket. Her laughter filled the whole house. It was sharp and sweet, like the first chime of spring bells. For a moment, I wasn't tired. I wasn't the woman who forgot to buy milk or had a laundry basket taller than she was. I was magical, and in her eyes, I was more than Mom. I was a fairy with a mop for a wand. The mornings were always a bit of a rush. Peanut butter on one slice of bread, jelly on the other, never the crusts. She hated those. I'd scribble quick notes on her lunch bag with whatever pen was closest. "Have a bright day, sweetheart. Smile today. Love you. Good luck on your spelling test. Proud of you." I always signed them. "Love, Mom," just like that. Every time. Her backpack would flop open on the kitchen bench, half zipped. There were crayons on the table, the smell of peanut butter mixed with the sharp tang of orange juice. Her hair was still damp from the morning brush through, and her socks never matched. "Mom, I forgot my library book." "It's in your folder, honey," I'd say, tucking the lunch bag shut and slipping it into her backpack. Those notes were small, almost silly, but they were my little way of showing up on the days I couldn't be there at lunchtime or when her nerves got big before a test. I wanted her to see my name, to feel it in her hands as she unwrapped her sandwich. Love, Mom, that wasn't just a sign-off. That was me, showing up in every bite. He always called me from the garden. Never loud, never rushed. Just my name, gently, like it was something worth savoring. "Margaret," he'd say, not shouting, just enough to carry across the porch. I'd come to the door, hands still dusted with flour, or sometimes soil from potting the mint. "What is it?" I'd call. "Just look at this rose," he'd say. "It bloomed this morning." It didn't matter if I was mid-recipe or halfway through folding a towel. When he called my name like that, I came. Because the way he said it, it was like a soft invitation back into myself. He didn't shorten it, didn't twist it. He let the full name land with love. The air would be thick with the scent of lilacs, birds in the trees, the soft creak of the garden gate swinging closed behind me. He said my name like it belonged somewhere, like it had roots, and every time I heard it, I believed it did. My name used to be everywhere, on the mailbox, on the kids' emergency contact cards. Tucked into the recipe box I wrote out by hand, the one labeled Margaret's Best Dishes in ink that's now faded to gray. Even the old quilt in the linen closet had a corner tag that read, Made. With love by Margaret, 1984. I didn't think twice about it then. My name was part of the house, part of the family. It meant something. At school pickup, they'd say, "Oh, you're Margaret's daughter." Or, "That's Margaret's casserole. We love that one." I wore my name like a well-loved sweater. It warmed me, gave me shape. But I didn't realize how stitched into everything it was until it began disappearing, one forgotten syllable at a time, until Margaret became Margaret. Until tags came with no name at all, and suddenly I felt like the stitches were being undone. Not loudly, just slowly, quietly. Enough to make me wonder if I ever really noticed how much of me was carried in those 7 little letters. The walls in our kitchen were yellow. Not the kind that blinds you, no. It was the color of early spring sunshine, softened by time and morning steam. We picked it together, my husband and I, from one of those tiny paper samples at the hardware store. I remember holding it up in the aisle and saying, "It feels like a smile." And he just nodded. That was enough. Sunlight used to filter through the gingham curtains in wide, warm stripes. On mornings like that, when the toast smelled just right and the coffee was still humming in the pot, I'd stand in that room and feel like the center of something good. The floor creaked when you stepped near the sink. That one loose board, that always gave a little sigh under pressure. I'd hear it and smile, because it meant someone was coming in for a second cup or a kiss on the cheek. Lemon-scented dish soap in the air, butter melting on toast, the soft clink of plates. I didn't need anything more than that. That space knew me. It held my laughter in the corners and my fingerprints on every handle. It's strange how a room can remember you better than a person. I always heard him before I saw him. The quiet tap-tap of his spoon against the side of his mug. That was our signal. He never shouted, never knocked loudly. Just those 2 soft taps. I'd come around the corner, hair still damp from the shower, and he'd already be seated with the crossword halfway done. "Running late, Maggie?" he'd say with a half grin. "No, you're just early again," I'd answer, pouring my coffee beside him. The kitchen felt full, even when we barely spoke. Steam rising from both our mugs, the hum of Nat King Cole, playing low on the radio. Our mornings were quiet, steady, stitched together with small rituals, and my name. He always said it, like it mattered. Maggie wasn't a filler. It wasn't the background. It was his favorite part of the sentence. There's something about the way a person says your name when they love you right. It wraps around your ribs and stays. The dish towel was warm in my hand, still damp from rinsing. I was drying a bowl when the song on the radio changed, something with a little swing in it. She was sitting cross-legged by the door, still in her socks, coloring on the back of a grocery list. I gave a little spin, lifting the towel like it was part of a dance. "Ta-da!" I sang, half laughing. She squealed. "Again, again!" So I twirled. Not like a dancer, more like a mom pretending not to have a sore back. But to her, I might as well have been on stage. Her laugh echoed through the hallway, high and bright like bells. I let myself twirl one more time, slower, smiling at the way she clapped her hands. "Mommy, you look like a fairy," she said, grinning up at me. I kissed her forehead. "Then you must be the sparkle in my wings." That's how it was back then. Just a dance and a giggle, and suddenly I was magic. The mornings were always a rush, hair to braid, socks to find, folders to sign. The kitchen table was chaotic, lunchboxes open, crayon caps missing, toast cooling too fast. Still, I always found a moment to write a note, just a few words on the side of the brown paper bag. "Have a bright day, sweetheart." "Love, Mom," or "You've got this." "Love you." I always signed them, always. She didn't see me write them most days. I did it before she came in, before her backpack got zipped, before the peanut butter smudged the counter. But I imagined her at lunch, pulling it out. I imagined the smile, the little piece of me that showed up when I couldn't. Mom, do I have to take carrots? Yes, and you'll thank me at recess. Her shoes thumped as she ran to the door, and I tucked the lunch inside her bag, sealing it with more than a zipper. It wasn't about what I wrote. It was that I signed it, that she saw my name folded into the middle of her day. The garden gate would creak just once, and then I'd hear it. Margaret. Not yelled, just called. Enough to carry. I'd be in the kitchen, hands in dough, or elbow deep in dishwater, and something about the way he said my name would make me stop what I was doing. I'd step out to the porch, wiping flour on my apron. What is it? He'd point to a bloom. The roses are early this year. That was it. No request, no need. Just my name, said like it mattered. He didn't shorten it, didn't play with it. He let it land full and clear. Sometimes I'd say it back to myself. Later, quietly, like a note echoing back from the garden fence. My name was everywhere. On the mailbox. On the return address labels I bought by the roll. It was on school forms, emergency contacts, permission slips. Margaret. Printed in black pen with steady hands. I stitched it into the inside of my jacket. I labeled casserole. Dishes and cookie tins. My name was on the quilt I made in '84, in the corner tag that read, Made with Love by Margaret. Even on birthdays, it was baked into frosting. To Mom, love Margaret's kitchen. And then slowly, things started to change. The notes got typed instead of written. The cards arrived without return addresses. Then one day, I saw it. My name, but missing a letter. Margaret. It was on a gift tag. Small, not cruel, just off. And I realized I hadn't seen it spelled right in a while. Not because they meant harm, but because they'd stopped looking closely and I'd stopped correcting them. I remember the first time she said it. Hi, Margie. Just like that. Smiling, casual, like she'd known me forever. It was early evening. We were in the living room, roasted chicken scent still floating in from the kitchen. My husband had poured her a glass of sweet tea. I was bringing out the plates. I paused, just for a second, when she said it. Margie. I'd never been Margie, not once in my life, not even as a girl, but she said it like it was charming, like it was her little welcome gift to me. So I smiled. Just enough. Oh, it's Margaret, I said lightly. But Margie's cute too, she laughed. It just suits you. I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? The sound came out hollow. The kind you use when someone wraps the wrong gift and you open it too slowly. Inside, something tugged. Just a thread, but deep. Like the start of a run in your favorite old sweater. You know it won't stop unraveling. My husband didn't say a word, just kept pouring, and I watched the moment slip by, unnoticed, uncorrected. That night, when I washed the dishes alone, I whispered my name into the rinse water. Margaret. Just to remind myself how it was supposed to sound. She walked into my house like she already knew the shape of it. Her heels barely touched the floor. She had that kind of step, careful, graceful, but not quiet. I'd vacuumed the guest room. Earlier that day, scrubbed the sink twice. Still, everything felt off. It was the perfume. That heavy, powdery scent. Sweet in a way that turned sour the longer it lingered. She passed by me in the hallway, smiled and said, It smells lovely. In here! And yet, what lingered wasn't lemon cleaner or dinner simmering on the stove. It was her. The scent clung to the walls, settled into the cushions, floated just beneath every breath. Too strong, too floral, too unfamiliar. I watched her run, a finger across the mantel like she was checking for dust, and I realized I didn't feel like the host. I felt like a guest who'd stayed too long. She complimented my curtains, said they had a vintage charm. I had just sewn them last year. By the time I set her bags down in the guest room, the one that used to be mine when I stayed over, I felt like my name had been softly folded and put away in a drawer, and no one had asked permission. I noticed it while walking down their hallway. Framed photographs lined the wall, each one smiling, posed, carefully arranged. I stopped in front of the biggest one, Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. I remembered that day clearly, the table set just right, the kids fighting over rolls, the way the pie cracked a little too early. Everyone was in the picture. Everyone is smiling. But something was wrong. I leaned in, my shoulder was there, barely. But my face, gone, cropped clean, the edge of the frame cut right through my cheek. No one had said anything when they hung it. No one had apologized. No one had even noticed, it seemed. I stood there, frozen, not angry, just still, like I'd suddenly realized I was furniture in the room, not family. I thought about asking, was this the only print? But I didn't. Just stared at it. My almost there presence. Like a decoration that didn't quite match, so they trimmed the edges. Someone walked past behind me. "Oh, you've seen that one," she said. "Isn't it perfect?" I smiled, but all I could think was, I used to be in the center of the frame. Now I was just something they could crop. The pie sat untouched beside the sink. I'd brought it warm, wrapped in a towel the way my mother used to. I'd brought flowers, too. Not grocery store ones, real ones, wrapped in brown paper. I even paid for the baby shower arrangements last month. Quietly, no fuss. That Sunday, I sat by the lamp, waiting. I glanced at my phone once, then again, then again. Nothing. No. Thank you. No, we love the pie. No little emoji hearts. I tapped the screen just to make sure the signal was working. It was. Just not for me. I stared at the tea on the table. Cold now. Still steeped with lemon, just the way she liked it. I told myself maybe they were tired. Maybe they forgot. Maybe thank you just wasn't said anymore, but I knew better, and it wasn't the silence that hurt most. It was how normal it had become. It was late when I heard it, her voice, just beyond the bedroom door, soft, but not whispering. She's sweet, just a little outdated, like something from the attic. A laugh followed, half sighed, half snorted, not mean, not sharp, just amused. I didn't move. I sat very still on the edge of the bed, brushing lotion across my hands. Lavender, like always. The moonlight was soft through the blinds. The room smelled quiet and memorable. I didn't cry. I didn't even frown. I just listened to her footsteps fade. And I thought about the attic, about the boxes I kept up there. Blankets stitched by hand, love letters tied in ribbon, report cards I'd tucked away like gold. Things that mattered once. I remembered every time I'd climbed those stairs with care, dusted each box, told myself, these are pieces of who we were. And now I was one of them, outdated, sweet, forgotten, like something you pass on the way to something newer. Lately I'd started asking before I spoke. Do you need help? Is it okay if I sit here? Should I wait in the other room? I hadn't always been that way. I used to just be. I took up space. I filled a room with stories, with casseroles, with laughter that came easy. But slowly, I found myself shrinking. Not physically, just quietly. I stopped offering ideas. I stayed quiet when plans were made without me, and every time someone talked over me, I let it slide. Oh, it's fine, I'd say. It's nothing. No, I'm good. But I wasn't. I was folding myself smaller, tighter, until one day I realized I'd become easy to ignore, not because I was unkind, but because I made it easy, because I softened every edge I had until no one could feel them anymore. That night, I reheated leftovers alone. The shadows in the kitchen stretched long. The scent of dinner, someone else's, still lingered faintly in the hall, and I sat in a chair that used to feel like mine. But now, it didn't notice when I left the room. The morning after Christmas always had a certain stillness, the kind that lingers in the folds of wrapping paper left on the floor. The pine scent from the tree was fading, and the living room felt softer, somehow, like a party trying to remember what it was celebrating. I sat cross-legged near the fireplace, watching them open the last round of gifts. I smiled, clapped when they laughed, passed the coffee without being asked. Then I saw it, taped neatly to one of the boxes meant for me, to Margaret. No A. The handwriting was lovely, actually, loopy and thoughtful, like someone had taken their time. But the name, not mine. I stared at it longer than I meant to, long enough that my granddaughter nudged it toward me. "Open it, Grandma." I did, slowly, smiling. The paper was beautiful, silver with tiny bells, and inside was a pair of gloves I'd admired in a store window weeks ago. They remembered the gloves, but not my name. I looked at the tag again, like it might change. Margaret, like I'd been renamed in quiet ink. I clapped again as someone else opened their gift. But inside, I felt like a ghost tapping on glass, here, but not quite seen. She held up her phone with a grin, scrolling quickly. "We got some great shots last weekend. Look, this one's my favorite." The screen lit up with a group photo. The family gathered on the porch, arms around each other, everyone smiling like nothing had ever hurt them, except I wasn't there. I stared, looked again, checked the edges. "Oh," she said, squinting. "You must have stepped away." I hadn't. I was there. I remembered the breeze, the way the baby squirmed, the way I'd stood just behind her shoulder because they needed room for the stroller. I hadn't stepped away. I'd just been placed back. I didn't say anything. She kept scrolling, flicking, past memories with the casual joy of someone who belonged in every frame. I nodded, smiled, sipped my coffee. The mug was cold. They tagged everyone in that photo. Every cousin, every spouse, even the dog. Not me. My name wasn't there. My face wasn't either. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't personal. It was worse. It was thoughtless. Like wallpaper no one notices anymore. Just there, faded, forgotten. They started calling it the guest room, not with cruelty, just casually, naturally. "Your towels are in the guest room." "Put her bag by the guest bed." I blinked the first time I heard it. Guest. That room used to hum with my scent, lavender, wool, a little old cedar from the closet. I used to nap there with the windows open. I used to read bedtime stories from that chair in the corner. But now, my framed photo is gone. My robe, which used to hang on the hook near the door, was folded away. Replaced. The bedding smelled like fresh detergent and something I didn't recognize. Lemongrass? Artificial? I couldn't place it. I folded the new towels and laid them gently at the foot of the bed. They weren't mine. I didn't choose them. But I still smoothed the edges like I belonged. I sat on the edge of the mattress and looked around. The space was beautiful, clean, perfect. But it no longer whispered my name. It didn't remember the woman who once filled it with lullabies and stories. It had been repurposed, like a room in a museum, nice to visit. But not to live in. The group chat buzzed all day. Brunch at 11? Who's got the play tickets? Can't wait for Napa. My phone stayed still, quiet, just the reflection of the screen staring back at me. I scrolled up, hoping maybe I'd missed something. Maybe they'd mentioned me. A mom or grandma. But there was nothing. I reread old texts, ones from months ago, a birthday wish, a thank you, something with a heart emoji. I read them the way you chew a piece of gum that's already lost its flavor, still hoping it gives you something. I glanced at the cold tea on my nightstand, untouched. Maybe I'm just not needed this week, I mumbled to myself. But the silence kept sitting next to me. Not loud, not rude, just present. The kind of silence that doesn't say, "Go away." It says, "We forgot you were still here." It was the second grade. The desks were scratched, the erasers half gone. My knees were scraped and my pigtails were crooked. She called roll. Margaret? I raised my hand fast. "It's Margaret," I said. Firm, but not angry, just sure. The teacher blinked, chalk still in hand. "Oh, thank you. I remember—" The pause in the room. A few kids looked at me, but no one laughed. I smiled. Sat up straighter. It wasn't about being fancy. It was about being me. Spelling my name felt like planting a flag. 7 letters, each one mine. At recess, someone asked, "Why does it matter?" I shrugged. "Because it's who I am." And I meant it. The rest of the day, she said it right. And every time she did, it felt like I'd carved out a space in the room just big enough for me. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea going cold in my hands. Cinnamon on the counter. A bun I hadn't touched. Maybe I was being silly. Maybe they were just busy. I told myself that, over and over, like a lullaby I didn't quite believe anymore. I thought about every small smile, every half hug, every missed call I'd excused away. They mean well, I'd say. They've got their own lives now. But that morning, with the light gray and low outside the window, I couldn't quite swallow the lie, because the ache in my chest didn't need evidence. It just needed air. So I sat, in the quiet, not angry, not even sad, just aware. Like finally, realizing you've been standing outside with your coat unzipped, wondering why you're cold. The wind found me before anything else did. I stepped through the door and the latch clicked too loud, like even the house wasn't ready for me. I stood there in the narrow hallway, coat damp with frost, shoulders still holding the cold like a secret I hadn't told anyone. The wind didn't follow me inside. It stayed outside, tapping the windows with just enough insistence to be noticed. Like it was asking to come in and keep me company. I didn't turn on the overhead light. I didn't need to see the silence to feel it. The lamp in the corner flickered, casting shadows that reached further than they should have. My boots left, a small puddle on the mat. I didn't move to take them off. My coat still smelled like her perfume. Not mine, hers. That sharp, too sweet scent I hadn't asked to carry home. I slipped the gloves from my hands one finger at a time, carefully. Like everything might break if I rushed it, the house didn't greet me. No warmth, no welcome, just me and the wind. Both of us standing outside something we used to belong to. It was still there, same place I'd left it. The deed folder sat on the side table, under a lamp that hadn't been turned on in days. Its corners were curling slightly now, the edges yellowing like old lace. I walked past it, sat down next to it, but I didn't touch it. It felt like paper that could burn. I folded my hands and stared at it instead, like if I watched long enough, it might whisper back what to do. That folder used to mean something solid, security, ownership, love, signed in black ink. My name was there once, full and proud. Margaret, spelled clearly, with every letter standing up straight. But now it feels heavy, like grief pressed flat. I thought about opening it, about reading it out loud just to hear if I still existed, inside, but I didn't. I just sat there, listening to the soft creak of the heater turning on, the faint scent of cold dust rising as it warmed. Even the air smelled old. At that table tonight, I wasn't really there. I watched them pass dishes, laugh, clink their glasses like a commercial for something expensive. Someone said grace. Someone else forgot the rolls. There was noise and light and movement. And yet, none of it touched me. Not by name, not by glance, not by intention. They didn't say, "Margaret, could you pass the salad?" They didn't say, "Mom, do you want more?" They didn't say anything at all. I moved like furniture, functional, familiar, forgotten, a part of the room, but not the memory. My name, once spoken with reverence, with warmth, with purpose, was now a ghost, floating just beyond their reach and mine, and they weren't afraid of it. They didn't even see it. They didn't feel the chill. I sat back, folded my napkin neatly, and watched my own erasure. Not dramatic, not loud, just complete. I lowered myself into my favorite chair like I always had, but something about it felt off. The cushion didn't welcome me the way it used to. It had forgotten the curve of my back, the way I used to tuck one leg under, the armrest, cold. The fabric is stiff. I looked out toward the window, the curtain gently swaying from a draft I hadn't noticed earlier. This was the chair I rocked babies in, told stories from. This was the seat of lullabies and soup on sick days. But tonight, it felt like it wasn't expecting me, like it had been moved on without asking. I sat still for a long time, letting the lamp beside me flicker shadows onto the floor. The scent of lavender still clung to the cushion. I'd spilled a sachet in. There once, but it smelled older now. Dimmed, I rocked once, gently. The chair creaked, but not in recognition, just in age, and I realized sometimes a place can stop holding you, even if you never left. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, elbows close to my ribs like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. The air was thick, not hot, not cold, just still. The refrigerator hummed gently from the kitchen. Nothing else made a sound. So I spoke, just one word. Margaret. I said it out loud, not loud enough to echo, just enough to disturb the quiet, and I flinched. Not from the volume, but from the strangeness. It felt foreign, like a name I hadn't earned, or like calling to someone already gone. I used to hear that name said with love, with recognition, with pride. Now it barely made a ripple, and I wondered when it had started to slip, not just from their mouths, but from mine. The room hadn't changed much, same frames on the mantel, same dusty corner by the bookshelf where the vacuum never quite reached. But something in me shifted as I looked closer. There were photos I used to be in. Pictures from birthdays, holidays, summer days with paper plates and lemonade. Some were gone, others were rearranged. Moved just enough that I was no longer centered, or no longer visible. I stood in front of one. Easter, I think. I could see the hem of my dress behind the picnic table. That's all. Just a hem. No one said anything. No one asked where that photo had gone, or why Grandma wasn't in more of them. That's what hurt the most, not the missing space, but no one noticed it was missing, like the house had reshaped itself around the absence. And nothing tilted. I could disappear entirely, and the walls would keep standing. I wasn't even really cleaning, just dusting the back shelf because the afternoon felt too quiet. The attic was warm, old sun filtering through the small window, turning the dust into gold flecks that floated slow in the air. That's when I saw it, tucked behind a quilt I hadn't unfolded in years. An old wooden box, small, familiar. The kind you keep not because it's valuable, but because it used to hold something that was. My fingers hovered over the latch. It had been years since I opened it, maybe decades. But something about the way the wood still smelled, cedar and maybe dirt, maybe warmth, pulled me in. I didn't know what I was looking for. I wasn't even sure I'd remember what was inside. But my hand moved anyway, and when I opened the lid, it was like something in me opened too. Not loudly. Just wide enough to feel air again. It was tucked beneath some fabric scraps, old lace, the corner of a dish towel my mother once embroidered. A thin wooden garden label. The ink had faded, but the shape of the letters still curved with confidence. Margaret's Mint, My mother's handwriting, soft but certain. I ran my thumb along the edge of it, careful not to break the wood. It had once stood in her garden, nestled next to the sprigs she always cut fresh for tea. She'd carved it just for me, to stake my name into the earth, to say, "This part belongs to her." Seeing it was like hearing her voice through the soil, whispering, something I hadn't let myself feel in too long. That tag wasn't a decoration. It was a declaration, and somehow, even now, it spoke with more truth than any place card ever had. I lifted the bundle of dried mint from the corner of the box. The scent rose instantly, sharp, alive, green, even after all these years. Like something that had waited quietly to be remembered. I brought it to my nose, inhaled slowly. It smelled like summer afternoons and sun-warmed porches. It smelled like women who planted things and made them grow. The fragrance didn't ask me who I was. It already knew. It wrapped around my breath like a welcome back. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel invisible. I just felt rooted. I held the little tag again. Margaret's mint, and I saw it differently now. It didn't just say my name. It claimed it, declared it, like a flag staked in the soil by someone who believed in me. That tag had once stood tall in a row of living things, sun-kissed, water, named, and so had I. I hadn't been erased. I'd just been buried under time, under politeness, under being quiet for the sake of peace. But buried things don't disappear. They grow. And in that attic light, something in me began to bloom again. I sat up straighter. It wasn't dramatic, just natural, like my spine remembered how to hold pride. Again. My hands stopped trembling. My breath deepened, and without meaning to, I said it. Margaret. I didn't whisper it. I didn't flinch at the sound. It felt full. Like the A had weight, like it had roots. No one else needed to say it for me anymore. I stood, not taller, just more me. The attic smelled of dried mint and old wood. The light had turned golden, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole in my own name. The folder was already open when I walked in. It sat at the edge of the kitchen table, like a question waiting for an answer. The morning light was soft, slanting in through the curtains, warm against the wood grain. My pen lay beside it, upright in its holder, ready, but still. I stood there for a moment, not sitting, just looking. The D space where his name would go, my son's, was empty, a blank line. All it needed was ink, a flick of the wrist, a signature. I could do it in seconds, and yet I sat down slowly. The chair creaked a little beneath me, familiar in its protest. I wrapped my hands around my mug, coffee already cooling, and stared at that empty line. My son, my boy. His name had once been the first thing I whispered into the night when he was born. But now it feels too heavy, not like legacy, like an obligation, like debt. And that's not what this house was built on. I traced the edge of the page with my fingertip. Thought about how quickly a name can disappear or appear on a document, as if paper understands relationships better than people do. The longer I looked, the more I knew. That space didn't belong to him. Not like this. Not after everything. The scent of wood polish always takes me back. He'd be halfway down the staircase, cloth in hand, whistling off-key. The late light would hit his knuckles just right, catching the small flecks of dust floating around him like fireflies. "We build for the living, Maggie," he used to say. "But we leave it for the kind." I never asked what he meant the first time. But he said it more than once. Usually on quiet evenings, when the house was clean and calm, and we were both too tired to talk about anything loud. He built this place with his hands, hammered the beams, sanded the windowsills. Every mark in the floorboards meant something: a dropped tool, a pacing worry, a late-night creak when our daughter would sneak to the kitchen. And me? I kept it standing. I filled the shelves, folded the blankets, kissed the bruises this house caught over the years. We didn't build it for show, or power, or control. We built it to hold people, and kindness, and love that didn't need proving. I remember him once standing at the doorway with his arm around my waist. We looked out across the garden he planted for me. "Don't let it become a trophy," he said, and I didn't forget that. Even now, when the house feels quiet and the garden's gone a little wild, I can still feel his voice in the boards beneath my feet. I dialed his number with no plan in my head. Just curiosity, just hope, or maybe something softer than hope, one last chance to feel heard. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom," he said, loud like he'd already been mid-sentence. "One." "Sec." I waited. I could hear dishes clinking, maybe silverware. A voice in the background, hers, laughing. Then he came back on. "So, you're handling the paperwork stuff, right, Margie?" "Margie." I didn't correct him. Not this time. I just swallowed the lump, the way you do when you realize the soup's already gone cold. I said, "Yes, I'm handling it." "Awesome," he replied. "We trust you. Just let us know when it's done." The conversation ended 5 minutes later, filled with filler and not much else. When I put the phone down, I didn't cry, didn't sigh. I just stared at the blank screen, like it had answered a question I hadn't dared to ask. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter, like a door closing gently behind someone who doesn't look back. And I realized I didn't need to ask permission. Not anymore. I said it aloud as I reached for the pen. "Margaret," not in anger, not in question, just in truth. My name filled the room, not loudly, not urgently, but fully. The way it used to when someone who loved me said it softly before dinner. If no one else would honor it, I would. My hand didn't shake as I picked up the pen. I didn't second-guess the line I was signing of the name I was writing. I had waited long enough for someone else to call me whole. Now I'd do it myself. Line by line, I wrote a version of the future where I wasn't, forgotten, where my story didn't fade at the edges, where my name was remembered, not as decoration, not as an obligation, but as a person who had mattered, a person who had built this. The sunlight inched across the tiled floor, catching the gold ring on my hand. The wall clock ticked gently. Behind me, steady and sure. So was I. In the margin of the new plan, I drew a little square. Not big. Just enough space for soil and sky. I left it, not in the will, but in the land itself. A patch of earth to stay untouched. A corner meant for roots and silence, and a wooden sign that would read, "Margaret's Light," not for legacy. Not for praise, just for memory. I imagined lavender growing tall, mint brushing the edge of the stones, bees drifting between petals like they were reading old poems, a space for breath, for color, for a name whispered only by the wind. I didn't tell anyone I'd set it aside. I didn't need to. It wasn't theirs to claim. It was mine to return to. My name, blooming again. Not in ink, not on parchment, but in something alive, a reminder that even the forgotten things can flower, especially when you choose to plant them again. The pen felt natural in my hand. I took a breath and let it glide, across the page, into the lines, into the places where meaning lives quietly. No trembling, no pause, just certainty. I signed my name the way it was always meant to be written. Margaret. Each letter is whole. Each stroke a refusal to vanish. When I finished, I set the pen down gently, stacked the papers neatly. The golden afternoon light touched the windowsill, making shadows stretch like slow exhalations. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a reclamation. I wasn't asking to be seen anymore. I had become the proof. Margaret. Full. Present. Unshakable, and exactly who I'd always been. The card was already waiting for me when I sat down. Same as every year. Margaret in gold script, soft and looping like it meant well. No one blinked. No one corrected it. And this time, neither did I. I set down my purse gently, smoothed the napkin across my lap, and pulled in my chair. The turkey filled the room with the smell of memory, cinnamon, orange peel, a little too much sage in the stuffing. I glanced around the table. Someone asked about cranberry sauce. Someone else teased the youngest for spilling water again. I didn't flinch when they said my name wrong, because it wasn't mine anymore, not the way they said it, not the way they misspelled it with such comfortable carelessness, but the name. I had reclaimed the one I'd written myself into again. That name wasn't fragile. It didn't need their notice. It lived quietly now, tucked into roots and ink and intention. The card could sit there like it belonged to someone else. Because it did. I passed the gravy boat with both hands, warm and steady. Compliment the pie with a soft, sincere, delicious, really. Laughed when the dog stole a napkin, when someone forgot to mute the football game in the other room, but this time, none of it felt performative. I wasn't playing the role of the mother or grandmother who makes herself small to keep the peace. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't looking. I was choosing. Their version of me could live in that room, pleasant, helpful, vague around the edges. But the version I'd built again? She was sitting quietly in her own chair, smiling without apology. For the first time, in years, my smile wasn't a mask, it was a boundary. It said, "This is as close as you get. I'll be kind. But I'm not asking for anything anymore." Later that evening, when the house was quiet and the dishwasher hummed in the background, I opened the drawer in my study. I pulled out the dinner place card. Margaret. Still elegant. Still wrong. I didn't tear it. I didn't sign. I simply slid it into the back of my deed folder behind the last page, where the old birthday letters and updates will now live. It wasn't proof of pain anymore. It was a record of what I refused to become. Next to it sat the new document. My name. Margaret, clear, exact, misspelled. Signed in full. That folder used to be filled with things people expected from me. Now, it was filled with the life I had chosen to claim. The desk lamp gave off a low amber glow, softening the corners of the room. Outside, the wind had settled. The evening was cool, but not cold, and my name, my real name, was exactly where it needed to be. I used to pause before I spoke, used to scan their faces for clues. Do they hear me? Do they remember? I'd hold my breath, hoping someone might finish my sentence for me, the way they used to. But now I don't wait. I speak gently, clearly, without needing anyone to echo it back. Because I'm not asking for mirrors anymore. I've built my own. Reflection, letter by letter. Out on the porch, the breeze carried the scent of damp leaves and soft soil. The sun touched my shoulders, not harsh, just present. I looked down the walkway at the garden I'd begun again. Nothing big, just space for something to grow. And as I stood there, rooted in my own rhythm, I realized something I hadn't before. I no longer needed to be seen. I had finally seen myself. Names aren't decorations. They're anchors. They hold you in place when everything else shifts. Mine had been cut short, trimmed down, passed off like it was just a detail. But it wasn't. It was a memory. It was soil. It was the sound of my mother calling me from the garden, of my husband humming. While sanding the porch rail, I used to think being kind meant being small. That silence was how you stayed welcome. But I've learned something. Silence isn't the same as peace, and kindness doesn't mean erasing yourself. Now, my name lives in the ground, a garden called Margaret's Light, mint, lilac, a little patch of rosemary, not for legacy, for truth, for softness that doesn't shrink. My name has roots now, deep, deliberate, and it's finally home. Thank you for sitting with me through this little story of names and knowing your worth. If you're 50 or older, I'd love to hear from you. Drop your age and where you're watching from in the comments. It warms my heart to know who's still out there, walking beside me. And if this story found a quiet place in you, subscribe. Grandma's got more tales, stitched from memory, rooted in truth, still waiting to be told.